We will spend at least two following weeks talking about the art of the Victorian period and the art of the 19th century, mostly the mainstream, but also some breakaway groups like the famous Pre-Raphaelites. But today I'd like to focus on one specific subject, namely the city life and the industry and also the life of the working classes, how these subjects were tackled by 19th century artists. And probably the first name that comes to mind is William Powell Frith. He could be seen to some extent also as a follower of the tradition of William Hogarth, in a way that he was a chronicler of daily life, especially the life in the city. He would make paintings that would show panoramas of social life, usually a scene where a lot of people coming from different social backgrounds would gather. So a beach at Ramsgate, or a railway station, or the horse races at Derby Day, or the inside of a bank close to the closing time. So the institutions of social life that start to really dominate the society of the 19th century, and that would allow for such sweeping views of different people coming from different backgrounds, doing different professions and having different aims. So again, it would be a good idea to find a good quality version, for example, of The Railway Station by William Powell Frith, and look up in close-up the different people and their roles and why they are at the railway station, what is their purpose and what happens. So we see newlyweds going for honeymoon. We see a family saying goodbye to a young boy who goes to school. We see people from the country who are running because they are afraid that they would miss the train. We see policemen arresting a thief. We see, of course, the workers tending to the luggage and the machine and the locomotive and everything. So people who work at the railway station. There are people who are richer, who travel first class, and those who travel second and third class. So we have different social backgrounds, but everything is more or less going smoothly. This is something that the Victorians really like. So those panoramic views of social life. William Powell Frith made it his specialty, really. So if you look at Derby Day, if you look at Ramsgate Sons, of course the Victorians did not go to the beach to swim in the sea or to sunbathe, but just to sit and picnic and enjoy the fresh air. And this is exactly what they are doing at the beach in Ramsgate. This painting actually was bought by Queen Victoria because she remembered Ramsgate. She was there with her mother as a young girl for holidays, for an excursion. So those panoramic views. Another one from this period is by Ford Madox Brown, the artist who was associated with the Pre-Raphaelites. He was never the member of the Brotherhood, but he was a close friend of the Pre-Raphaelites. And his painting called Work is another version of such a panoramic view of the society. So it's a scene outside with some workers actually repairing the road. So in the center there's a big hole in the ground, and the navvies, that is the workers who worked on and later on the road system. They are repairing the work, and around them all the citizens cluster. So we have some intellectuals on the right hand side, and middle class ladies just going visiting somewhere, and we have people working in the streets selling different things. There is a political rally in the background. There are some aristocrats riding horses, and they are now blocked by the roadworks. There is a policeman, there is a postman, so everybody is doing their own little thing. There are even some paupers, some vagrants looking for work in the city, or beggars trying to make a living. So this is, in a way, you might say also Hogarthian. If you look close at this painting, you will observe that there are some dogs. So just like Hogarth, there is a rich dog and a poor dog looking at each other in this kind of rather wary way. We also have images of the daily life of the Victorians. So, for example, William Dyce's recollection of Pegwell Bay. So, a family, actually the family of the painter himself, enjoying another day at the beach and collecting some fossils. This beach was quite famous for the fossils that you could find. So it's not just looking for anything, just pretty shells, but something with a scientific background to it. And also you can see one of the cycles of murals by William Scott Bell, the artist from the north of England, from around Newcastle, so one of the cities that were really enriched by the industry and the technology. And this one is called Iron and Coal, and again it's a kind of panoramic view of the workers working the iron and the shipbuilding industry in the background, and in the very foreground there's a young girl sitting, looking happy and well fed, and actually holding a school book in her hand. So this is also the social progress that was inspired by the industry and the growing prosperity of the cities. The other side of this was, of course, the life of the poor, especially the life of the city poor and the life of the workers. So you have some artists, especially people like Richard Redgrave, who would really focus on the life of the working classes. So we have his painting of the seamstress, so a woman who worked by needlework. We have another picture of the governess, so a poor young woman who has to work as a teacher, as a private teacher in a richer house. And if you look at such works, you have to remember that the artists mostly came from the middle class, and definitely the people who frequented the art exhibitions and who could buy the paintings came mostly from the middle class. So the point was really to attract the attention of the middle class audience to the nobility and also the plight of the poor. This is what you have in the works slightly later on of Luke Fields or Hubert von Herkomer. Von Herkomer was again a foreign artist, but he made a great success, a great career in Britain. He even painted one of the later portraits of Queen Victoria herself. But when he wanted to paint for his own ambition, for his own pleasure, let's say, he painted the poor people. So the works like Hard Times or On Strike show the families of workers, Sometimes agricultural workers, like in hard times, they are forced to migrate to the city, or industrial workers, like on strike. You have the family of an industrial worker, and apparently, well, you can judge from the title, he's not going to work this day because the workers are on strike. They're trying to improve their situation. And if you look at the way that these poor models, these poor characters are portrayed, they are again portrayed with a lot of carefulness and dignity, and they are shown as people deserving of social help. The same happens with Luke Files. For example, the doctor, which shows a good doctor very anxiously looking at a sick child in a very poor interior. They don't even have the bed, so the child is laid on two chairs and some pillows, and the parents are in the background looking very sad and distressed, and the doctor is looking at the child with a lot of weariness, and he's probably trying to guess whether the child will survive. This was one of the most popular late Victorian paintings, and these paintings were reproduced in forms of lithography. They were printed, and you could buy a cheaper version or a cheaper print, colored or not, to display in your home. And many people in the Victorian middle class would have copies of this particular painting, The Doctor by Luke Files. Another one we have applicants for admission to a casual ward. So a line of paupers in front of the workhouse, a notorious Victorian institution which was supposed to help the poor. And they all look dignified. They all look respectable. We have a young widow in black clothes, so she honors her dead husband. She has small children to feed. We have a respectable looking family. We have a soldier who's probably been wounded in action, and now he is reduced to begging. Two more images that you can see in the presentation are both called the Stonebreaker, and they were made within 1 year of each other. One is by Henry Wallace, the Stonebreaker, and one is by John Brett. It's also called the Stonebreaker. One is from 1857, one is from 1858, and they're quite funny if you contrast them, because Wallace's Stonebreaker shows a very dark, gloomy painting with the slumped figure of the Stonebreaker almost melting into the mud. We do not even know whether this person is alive. Perhaps he is depressed and he's just kind of slumped, or maybe he died from exhaustion. There is a very, very visible contrast if you look at John Brett's Stonebreaker, who is a happy, young, cheerful, cleanly dressed lad, just hammering away with his hammer, and accompanied by a little happy doggy. The stonebreakers were quite important for the economy, because those stones were important for the road surfaces. This was a really hard physical labor, something that the inmates of the workhouse would do, or something that the prisoners would do. So of course some of the images show the dark side. Some of them try to make the image of physical labor more cheerful, and so perhaps not as depressing, so that the middle class audience would be more inclined to donate to charity. But if you think about it, child labor, like the chimney sweeping, was almost a stereotype in Victorian culture. And in the last part today, we'll return to George Cruikshank and his illustrations. So you may remember George Cruikshank from my talk on the political caricature in the Regency period. I told you he had a long life and a very illustrious career, mostly from his 30s as the book illustrator, a very respected book illustrator. And later in life, he gained massive popularity and a considerable fortune by publishing cycles of prints very much in the style of William Hogarth. So if you remember the Rake's Progress or the Harlot's Progress or Mariage à la Mode, George Cruikshank believed himself to be the follower, the descendant in the artistic style of William Hogarth. As a young man, he was no stranger to the pleasures of life, and we know that he liked partying and drinking and all that. Later, he started to observe that, especially in the poorer sections of the society, alcoholism was a massive problem leading to poverty, violence, crime, and moral degradation. So in 1848, he published a eight-part cycle called The Bottle. It shows in gradual stages the destruction of a family. We can guess from the first plate that this is a family of a skilled laborer, so working class but relatively well off, with a nice cozy interior, with a cat and 3 children, but the husband brings the alcohol into the home. This is probably gin, the strong alcohol that was still believed to be the ruin of the working classes. And they wouldn't really normally drink wine, and beer, just as you may remember from Hogarth's prints, was seen as a healthy and more morally even better drink that would contribute to prosperity and health rather than the ruin. So it's probably the gin bottle. So the man brings the bottle home to celebrate something. The wife is tempted. They drink. Nothing happens. They are still happy and wealthy. But already in the second print, the man loses his job because of drunkenness, and then it goes down very quickly. They have to sell their belongings. They eat a worse diet. They do not have money for heating, so the youngest child dies, and the boy and girl, who are probably in their teens, early teens, are reduced to the life of vice and crime. We can discern that in the last plate they are already demoralized. The girl is probably a prostitute, judging by her clothes. The young boy, still very young, he's shown smoking a cigarette, and probably he is a thief. So like one of the boys from Oliver Twist that Cruikshank illustrated himself. And the wife, the mother of the family, has been murdered by her husband in a drunken rage when they do not have the money for alcohol, but they are deeply addicted, and then the man goes violent and kills the wife with the bottle. So we have all the captions and the illustrations telling the story. This is something very Victorian, the narrative pictures, the pictures that tell the story. You'll find quite a lot of such stories in Victorian art. So the man kills his wife and is arrested, but just like the main character from The Rake's Progress, he goes insane. So on top of being a criminal, he is also a lunatic, and when his children visit him in the last image, he is completely demented, he is completely deranged. And this cycle was so popular, and people really loved it. They bought thousands of copies of this cycle. Actually, George Cruikshank himself became a teetotaler, so he became a total abstinent from alcohol and smoking, so he was very much against such substance abuses. He produced the sequel called The Drunkard's Children. They are not in the presentation, but look it up. It shows the continued downfall of those young people from the first cycle. So the boy continues the life of crime, and the girl continues the life of prostitution. And spoiler alert, of course, she dies in the end by suicide. So she becomes a fallen woman, but also a falling woman. She flings herself from the bridge into probably the River Thames. So this is really the cautionary tale. It doesn't have the humor of Hogarth. It doesn't even have this kind of biting satire of the Regency period, but it's there to serve the purpose, to serve the moral purpose of social betterment. And the temperance movement, so the movement aiming to reduce or completely abandon the use of alcohol, especially among the poor, among those who are the easiest to feel the downfall. This was something very typical for the Victorian period. The last thing about George Cruikshank, he still had an ambition to be recognized as a painter, and towards the end of his life he produced a big, massive, large-scale painting called The Worship of Bacchus, the Roman deity of the wine and merrymaking, and also the deity connected with some sort of, let's say, losing control of one's behavior. I will give you the link. This is a big painting, but it really looks like a mass of small pictures showing the entire society. So not only the poor, but also the middle classes, even the rich, the judges, the clergy, the politicians, all drinking alcohol and paying the price for it, and the whole society suffering because of the results of what he calls the worship of Bacchus, so alcohol drinking. Very Victorian, very Cruikshank, I would say. And yes, so I will give you the links. You'll be able to see that for yourself. And we continue next week about the Victorian art. Thank you.